What happens when one of the world's most iconic cities decides cars just don't belong anymore? This is not a proposal for the future. In Paris, it's happening now. Over the past few years, traffic lanes have vanished, sidewalks have grown wider, and cars have been pushed out of the city altogether. For most of the 20th century, Paris was a city built around the car, wide boulevards designed for traffic, expressways running along the Seine, and entire neighborhoods shaped by parking and congestion. Like many global capitals, it followed the same logic. More roads meant more movement, and more movement meant progress. But over the past 2 decades, and especially since 2014, that logic has been flipped on its head. So, how did Paris get here? What triggered this shift? And can a city like Paris, dense, historic, and still home to millions of cars, actually function without them? To understand what Paris is doing today, you have to understand what it was before. In the 19th century, Paris was redesigned under Baron Haussmann, the man behind the city's signature wide boulevards. These streets were never built for cars. They were built for horses, carriages, and military parades. But once cars became the norm in the 20th century, those same boulevards became perfect funnels for traffic. Then came the expressways. In the mid-1900s, the city cut open its riverbanks and built high-speed roads along the Seine. It added a beltway, the périphérique, to circle the city. By the 1980s, traffic was not just part of Paris, it defined it. The average Parisian driver lost nearly 90 hours per year sitting in congestion. Streets were clogged, sidewalks were narrow, parking took up huge portions of public space, and the assumption was this is just the cost of living in a major city. But the cost wasn't just noise and congestion, it was pollution. In 2015, Paris was among the most polluted cities in Europe. Some days, the smog was thick enough to block the Eiffel Tower from view. Nitrogen dioxide levels routinely exceeded safe limits. And at one point, city officials were forced to make public transport free, just to get drivers off the road during extreme pollution alerts. But even before that crisis, the shift had already started. In 2001, Paris began experimenting with summer pedestrian areas, closing parts of the riverbank and calling it Paris Plage. In 2007, it launched one of the world's first major bike share systems, Velib. These were small changes, but they laid the foundation for something bigger. Between 2002 and 2022, traffic on Paris streets dropped by nearly 50%, and that wasn't by accident. It was the result of years of deliberate policy. Now the transformation is accelerating, and the reason why has a lot to do with health and with pressure from something far bigger than traffic. By the early 2010, the numbers were hard to ignore. Paris was exceeding legal air pollution limits set by the European Union, not occasionally, but regularly. The main culprit was clear: traffic, most of it from diesel engines. A National Health Agency report linked air pollution to 48,000 premature deaths annually in France, with Paris among the worst affected zones. Respiratory illnesses were rising. Children walking to school were breathing in fumes at levels considered unsafe, and extreme heat, made worse by asphalt, traffic, and lack of greenery, was becoming more dangerous each summer. At the same time, congestion had become unmanageable. Drivers were spending hours stuck in traffic. Noise levels in central neighborhoods stayed above recommended limits, day and night. And public transit was often slower than it should have been, because it had to compete with cars for space. The public mood was shifting. Clean air wasn't a political issue anymore. It was a health issue. And the idea that streets should serve people, not just cars, was starting to gain traction. Mayor Anne Hidalgo took office in 2014 with a clear mandate: cut pollution, reduce traffic, and make the city safer for everyone not in a vehicle. Then came the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. The city that hosted it was now under global pressure to take its own emissions seriously. The policies she introduced were designed to do exactly that, and they did. But they didn't just change emissions. They started changing how the city moved, looked, and felt. Once the decision was made to reduce car dependence, the question became how. Paris didn't go for one big move. It went for dozens of smaller ones, all at once. Bans, redesigns, incentives, and restrictions, targeting how people move, where they park, and how much space cars take up in the first place. It started with vehicle restrictions. Old diesel cars were the first to go. Then came new rules that banned petrol vehicles built before 1997. A low-emission zone was created across the city. Paris is not just nudging drivers away from fossil fuels, it's forcing a complete shift. To reinforce that, the city introduced financial disincentives. SUVs, especially the heavier ones, now cost up to €18 an hour to park. Every car is required to display an emissions sticker, and those with high-polluting engines face either steep fines or a ban from entering the city on high smog days. But removing cars is only one part. The bigger shift has been in how space is being repurposed. Bike infrastructure exploded. In less than 10 years, Paris added more than 1,300 kilometers of cycling routes. Some are temporary lanes made permanent, others cut through the heart of the city, like the Rue de Rivoli, once a traffic artery, now dominated by cyclists and buses. Protected bike lanes now run along nearly every major boulevard. And the city didn't stop there. Car lanes were narrowed, thousands of on-street parking spaces were removed. In their place came trees, benches, bike paths, and wider sidewalks. Plazas were redesigned. Riverbanks that once served as expressways are now pedestrian zones. Entire neighborhoods are transitioning into low-traffic or traffic-free zones, especially in the city center. And during weekends and holidays, many districts fully close off to cars under the Paris Respire program, letting people reclaim their streets. And the results are showing. Traffic volumes in Paris have dropped by 40% over the past decade. Cycling rates have doubled, and the city is rapidly moving toward a model where driving is the exception, not the default. Rue de Rivoli, once a major traffic corridor, now sees up to 20,000 cyclists per day, outnumbering cars nearly 6 to 1. But Paris didn't stop at major boulevards. It zoomed in even closer, to where the most vulnerable pedestrians are. While Paris was cutting car lanes on major roads, another transformation was happening on a smaller scale, right outside schools. One of the most popular and visible changes has been the creation of rues aux écoles, or school streets. These are roads that have been closed off to vehicles, either during school hours or permanently, to make it safer for children walking in and out of class. As of now, over 300 school streets have been implemented across the city. Some are fully pedestrianized with planters, benches, and play areas, others close to cars at peak times. Either way, the goal is the same. Remove the dangers and noise of traffic where kids gather every day. And it's not just about safety. These zones are cooler, greener, and cleaner. With lower exposure to air pollution, the city uses simple barriers and paint to make the changes fast and affordable. And the public response has been largely supportive, especially among parents and teachers. Beyond schools, Paris has also reduced speed limits across nearly the entire city. The default speed is now 30 kilometers per hour or 19 miles per hour. That's not just symbolic. At that speed, fatal crashes drop dramatically, and for people walking or cycling, the streets feel noticeably calmer. Add that to a sharp reduction in parking, more trees, and reclaimed sidewalks, and the city's street network starts to feel less like infrastructure and more like a place to live. This focus on safety, especially for children, didn't just help reduce accidents. It helped change how people feel about their neighborhoods. Paris didn't just make driving harder, it made space for other things by getting rid of what cars had already claimed. That starts with parking. By 2024, the city had removed over 50,000 on-street parking spaces, about half of the total available. That's the equivalent of reclaiming over 150 acres of urban land, or roughly 75 football fields. And that's just the beginning. The goal is to eliminate even more by 2026, freeing up space for bike lanes, trees, public seating, and pedestrian areas. Many of the former parking zones have been converted into parklets, mini public spaces with benches, planters, and sometimes even community gardens. Others have become widened sidewalks or extensions of cafes. In some cases, they've simply been replaced with trees. And it's not just curbside parking. Entire sections of roads have been taken out of circulation. When a street gets resurfaced, the city often uses it as an opportunity to permanently remove car lanes, replacing them with bus lanes, protected bike paths, or pedestrian zones. This is about more than aesthetics. It's about reshaping behavior. Paris knows that if it makes parking harder and less convenient, fewer people will choose to drive. And so far, the data backs that up. Car use continues to decline year after year. But these changes haven't come without pushback. Not everyone has welcomed Paris's car-free policies, and the resistance started almost as soon as the first roads were closed. For drivers, especially those living in the suburbs, these changes were not just inconvenient. They felt targeted. People commuting in from outside the city said they had no other choice but to drive. And with fewer lanes, higher parking fees, and more restrictions, they felt pushed out. Business owners also raised concerns. Some claimed that fewer cars meant fewer customers. Delivery access became more complicated, and for a while, some districts saw tensions rise between local authorities and shopkeepers. There was also legal opposition. When the city closed the expressway along the right bank of the Seine, opponents took it to court, arguing it would increase congestion elsewhere. Eventually, the city won, but the fight revealed how controversial these changes had become. Politically, car restrictions became a dividing line. During the 2020 elections, opposition candidates ran campaigns focused on reversing some of these policies. But Hidalgo won re-election with a wide margin, signaling that a majority of Parisians supported the direction the city was heading. Still, the backlash highlighted real concerns, especially about equity. Many of the most dramatic improvements happened in central Paris, but residents in outer districts and suburbs often lacked reliable alternatives. Removing cars without expanding public transport or transit links created a visible urban-suburban divide. To address this, the city and region began investing more heavily in transit connections, including new tram and metro lines linking suburban areas to the center. The Grand Paris Express is part of this long-term fix. And over time, some of the skepticism started to fade. Streets that were once seen as closed began to feel more open, just not to cars. In reality, many of the newly pedestrianized areas are seeing more foot traffic and higher retail activity than before. It turns out, when you give space back to people, they show up. The opposition hasn't disappeared, but in many places, it's been replaced by adaptation, because once people experience a quieter, safer, cleaner street, they don't always want to go back. In 2001, most residents still saw the car as essential. Today, fewer than 30% of households in Paris own one. That's the lowest it's been in decades. And it's not because people can't afford them, it's because they're choosing not to. More Parisians now walk, cycle, or take public transport than ever before. And it's not just younger generations. Office workers, parents, seniors, they're all adapting to a city that now makes alternatives faster, cheaper, and more convenient than driving. Cycling in particular has gone from niche to mainstream. The city's bike-sharing system, Vélib, has millions of users. Dedicated lanes have made commuting safer, and the culture around cycling has changed. It's no longer seen as just for sport or leisure. It's a normal part of daily life. Even the idea of what a normal street looks like has shifted. Squares that were once defined by traffic flow are now defined by foot traffic. Places like Place de la Bastille or Place de la République have become gathering spaces for markets, protests, or simply a place to sit. There's also the rise of the 15-minute city, an urban model where everything you need is within a short walk or bike ride. Schools, shops, clinics, parks, workplaces. It's not just theory. Paris has started turning this into policy by encouraging mixed-use development, cutting commute times, and pushing for local access to essential services. And these changes are reinforcing each other. As more people switch to bikes or walking, there's more political support to keep expanding those networks. As streets get quieter and cleaner, more residents start using them differently, and fewer ask for parking spots in return. This wasn't just a traffic reform, it's a cultural shift, and it's turning the old equation upside down. Where cars used to symbolize convenience and freedom, now it's the opposite. However, Paris is not the only city trying to push cars out. Amsterdam has long been a model for bike-first infrastructure, but even there, changes didn't happen overnight. In the 1970s, the city was packed with cars. It took years of protests, political shifts, and investment to get to where it is now, where cycling is the default and cars are second. Oslo eliminated over 700 on-street parking spaces in its center, cutting car traffic by 35% in just 2 years. Instead of banning cars outright, the city made it functionally impossible to drive through the center. Foot traffic went up, retail didn't collapse, and the streets became public space again. Milan used the COVID lockdown to rethink its streets, converting entire corridors into pedestrian and bike-friendly zones in a matter of weeks. That emergency plan has now turned into permanent infrastructure. New York City banned cars from Central Park, created permanent pedestrian plazas in Times Square, and is preparing to launch congestion pricing in Manhattan. Progress has been slower, but the direction is familiar. All of these cities, and others like London, Bogota, and Brussels, are watching what works, what doesn't, and what Paris is willing to try next. In fact, Paris has become something of a benchmark. When other mayors pitch bold street reforms, they often point to what's already happening in the French capital. But this is not about copying Paris, it's about showing what's possible, especially in a city known for traffic, tourism, and tight urban space. The takeaway is clear: if a dense, historic, globally connected city like Paris can do this, then so can others. But Paris is not finished yet. If anything, it's only halfway through a plan that extends to 2030 and beyond. By then, the city wants every street to be walkable or cyclable. Cars will be banned, and through traffic in the city center will no longer be allowed. The The Grand Paris Express, a massive expansion of the regional metro system, is under construction now. It will add 200 kilometers of new metro lines and 68 new stations, connecting 2 million people across the Paris region. When complete, it will connect outer suburbs to the core with fast, high-capacity rail. That's a critical piece of the puzzle. If you want people to stop driving, they need real alternatives, especially those who don't live in the city center. Meanwhile, the city continues to remove parking spaces, convert intersections into public spaces, and build out a cycling grid that already rivals the best in the world. So, what do you think? Could a city like yours do what Paris is doing? Or is this something that only works in theory and only in France? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you soon in the next one.